Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar The Last Airbender, a show where myself, a long-time fan of the Avatar franchise, introduces my good buddy Chris and co-host. Good buddy and co-host. It's a job and a friendship.
Usually he puts those two the other way round, but it's nice. It's nice to hear them that way round, Dan.
Who's being introduced to the show for the first time, hence the Last Airbender. We have made our way all the way up to the second series of Korra, the episode Peacekeepers, which I think last week I implied that Civil Wars Part 2 was episode 5, but actually that was episode 4. This is episode 5. Can't win them all, Chris.
And what an episode 5 it was, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Remind the peeps what happened.
I shall. This, for those of you who don't recall, is the episode in which Korra goes back to Republic City to seek the assistance of the United Council, United Federation of Planets. I don't know, like the United something, United Forces. There it is. I've just found it in the Wikipedia page. So she goes back to get the help of United Forces. The president's all like, I don't know if we should get involved in this domestic dispute, civil war. And I don't really feel like doing it. And she's kind of like, isn't that kind of the whole point of having a United Forces? Like, why have you got an army if you can't get involved in other nations' affairs? Like, what is the purpose of this army? I mean, I guess to stop another Fire Nation invasion of everyone, maybe? I don't know. Like, at what point do they get involved? Anyway. Korra wanders in with no like, evidence that anything dodgy has happened at all, other than the testimony of a man she tortured. And I guess that's not enough. So, she turns to alternate means. She tries to get Zukipu's grandson involved, General Iroh, and he's all like, oh, well, if we happen to be in those waters and they attack us, then... But Mako betrayed her and told the president that was the plan, who shuts it all down. Korra and Mako sort of break up in a way that, like, but both characters kind of left being surprised that was the outcome. And as Korra goes to involve herself more directly, she is attacked by a giant spirit. B-plots involve Bolin becoming a mover star as Nuktuk, hero of the South, and Varric sort of negotiating a deal where, or being part of an idea that brings Asami into the plot a bit more, where she's going to be potentially supplying weapons to the southern water tribe so they can defend themselves against the north. It's all happening, Chris. Oh, and also, of course, tiny little C plot of Vacation Tenzin bonding with Milo over training lemurs. So,
yeah, and then there's also a spirit attacks at the end.
Yeah, I mentioned that. I said I thought I said that. Maybe I didn't. Yeah, Korra is attacked by a spirit as she's on her way out. Maybe I went to say that and then realized I needed to explain where she was going, and then I got distracted. So yeah, that's the episode. It's a bit of a I've been recapping these for a while now. Since Avatar, we probably did it for like Steven Universe as well, and I prefer it when a plot is simple enough that I can recap it in a sentence or two.
Yeah, and there I think it lies the problem. Like, same caveat as last week. I'll be on. No, it's different this week. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say it. Still love the show. Don't want to come down like I'm hating it. Still a lot to love and enjoy this week. But last week I did a whole speech of, not nitpicking, but like we critiqued a bit last week, and I sort of said, look. We're critiquing because we're analysing this for an hour. If we were just watching it through, I would have watched this episode and I'd have gone okay, cool, and I'd move on to the next episode. It was for the sake of discussion. This week, no, I think if I was just watching this through, the episode would have ended and I'd gone, that was a lot. There was a lot there. That episode was a bit here, there, and everywhere. And at the end, where she's now on the water and they're attacking, and now that's attacking, and she can suddenly calm the spirit. We didn't really see her get trained to do that.
Well, it doesn't work. And to be fair, and it's also, I think, for the first time this series, correct use of the Avatar state. So not to undermine the point, because I think your overall point is actually bang on, but just on that detail, she goes under the water, she nearly drowns, and then she goes into the Avatar state, and it's while in the Avatar state that she starts to try and calm the spirit.
Yeah.
So you could argue that's her tapping into her knowledge from previous avatars who might have been able to do that. And then that doesn't work, and then it ends with that sort of attack. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify because I think on that point they kind of got away with it. But your overall point, I'm 100% agree with.
And the breakup. Sorry, I don't give a fuck anymore. Stop it. I'm done. I'm done with love triangle bullshit. I know this isn't love triangle bullshit, but I'm... Alright, cool. We're doing this plot again with these two characters. Lovely. Cool.
I don't think they haven't broke up before, I don't think.
Yeah, but they've bickered and they fought, and this fight's just a bit bigger. And it's ended up in them breaking up. And hey, maybe that's clever. Maybe that's, the tension's been there all along. They were never going to last. We sowed the seeds for that. Cool. Yeah, no, you did. Yeah, no doubt. But I don't care. I don't care about the breakup, Dan. I don't.
Well, did they though? Okay, let's start there. Because what they sowed the seeds for was that Korra keeps letting her, and I'm asking this as a question. I'm not saying this is my opinion because I'm not sure. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this episode. I only watched it, less than an hour ago, so I don't think all of it is settled in my brain yet. But let's talk it through. Korra has this season had multiple episodes where she snipped at Mako.
Dan summarising the purpose of the podcast there.
No, but sometimes we come with our opinions already formed, and sometimes we kind of realize what we feel as we talk about it. This is a talk about it to see if I can put because it's so muddled and there's so much back and forth, and particularly the Korra and Mako of it all, that I'm not sure how I feel about it because I'm not really sure what's gone wrong. Do you know what I mean? The show hasn't been clear communicating to me what is wrong with this relationship for it to have led to a breakup, other than plot stuff. So this is why I'm just trying to piece it together because right now it is a bit of a mess. So let's just backtrack to the first couple episodes, right? We had multiple scenes where she snipped at him, and at the end, we realized it wasn't the premise was it wasn't about him. She was letting her feelings about whatever else is going on affect how she's treating him. Right? And it reminds me actually of a really good clip I saw recently of is it Bill Burr, the comedian, talked about why he's less angry these days, and he just realized that whenever he was mad because someone cut him off in traffic or mad about some random thing, it was never about that thing. It was always more about where he was at and what's going on with him, and realizing that helped him manage his anger. And I think this is what we're doing. We're supposed to be. This is what they're trying to do with Korra this season, right? She's flying off the handle constantly. This is supposed to be sort of the arc, and presumably by the end of the season, she's going to be hopefully, theoretically, the story would be Korra starts the season just snipping at everyone for stuff that's out of her control and wider issues, not realizing that's why she's doing it, and slowly going into realizing that. So that's the first few episodes. Korra snaps at Mako, and at the end, she goes, "I'm sorry, it wasn't about you. I'm just, I'm stressed. I'm tense about this and that." Right? Then we have this episode where Mako is asked the direct question from the president. The president goes, "Do you know about anyone conspiring?" And Mako's like, "My girlfriend." So Korra's mad this time, legitimately so, in that she actually has a reason. She has a reason to be mad at him this week. It's different to those previous ones.
Can I make a side comedic interjection there? At least, comedic's bold, but because that's not what actually happens. The president walks off at Marco's size. I would have loved to have seen the scene where he has to go, Mr. Excuse me, actually, Mr. Come back here. Just now. Yeah, no, I was lying to your face. Literally, literally lying to your face, buddy. Come back. Let me tell you. Let me tell you a tale about what they're doing. Or has to go into the chief and be like, oh no, has to go into the chief and be like, can you just get a message to him? Well, why don't we go tell him to go? No. It's going to be pretty. I just lied. But because he's definitely going to find out because he's going to go and speak to old Zukipoos. Zukipoos Jr., ZPJ, as he's known. I just love the idea because he walks out. I just love the idea that he has to be like, excuse me, actually, I changed my mind. They are planning some shit.
Yeah, exactly. Because he has to go back on it because dramatic effect, and it's like, and you know what? That's fine. That's just it's TV, isn't it? It's that thing where two people are having a conversation, and then we cut to they're in a different location, and they're literally just continuing the conversation. It's like, did you guys just spend 6 minutes in silence? It's one of those kind of things. It's like part of the language of TV. It's awkward and weird, but it's fine, right? So I'm not going to criticize the show for that. It's a good observation, but it's not like the problem.
I'm not criticizing. I just found it amusing.
Yeah. No, it is. It's very amusing. But this is my point, though. Is like, so the previous weeks were telling us, and I'm just trying to straighten this out in my own head because I think the show has really muddled this, and kind of the problem really is how unclear this quote unquote arc has been. I think it's there if you dig and lay it out as I'm doing now. So we've gone from Korra bickering with Mako because she's letting her stress from other things get to him, to this time Mako has actually done something that she is mad about. So this is direct cause and effect now. And it's immediately led to the breakup. So are we saying, is the show telling me that if Korra had been a bit more able to regulate her feelings and be a bit more balanced about things, maybe this week she'd have recognised where Mako was coming from and it wouldn't have led to a breakup? Is that...
No, I think it's inconsistent. I think Mako fucked up. I actually, as much as I'm like, ugh, about them, and that's literally the noise, about them breaking up and them fighting and all of that shit, actually, the story behind the breakup of Mako having to make that choice is an interesting one. We've seen it before, but that tension within him of doing what he perceives to be the right thing, and which is, although again, it is muddled because his other plot of the episode, which gets let go of, is something weird's going on here. This situation isn't quite right. We've literally seen him be bullied and dismissed by the organisation he is then siding on. So it is fucking muddled. But you know what I mean? When he talks to the other guys and they just dismiss the picture and they take the piss and they make him go in and they make him embarrass himself, he then turns on Korra for that same group. Like, it's muddled as fuck because it's just, as with all of it, it's just trying to do too much. Mako shouldn't have two plots in this episode because one of them gets forgotten about halfway through. Like, he works in the police. Just have him at the station, and they play a trick, and that's when he's at whatever. Anyway,
well, to be fair, I don't. I'm pretty convinced, and I'm not going off memory here. I'm going off just. I think that's coming back. The idea that it wasn't done because one of the tensions this week between Mako and Korra, and again, one of the reasons this is so muddled is it's not just about this situation with the president, where he kind of accidentally gives Korra's plan away, or not accidentally, like gives Korra's plan away. There's this secondary plot, for those who don't recall, where Mako, the southern water tribes, like, I don't know what you want to call it. What's the word? Like an embassy sort of building. Like, they have another word for it, but it's like essentially it's like a southern water tribe embassy is bombed, and everyone just immediately assumes, well, that's the northern water tribe, obviously. This is part of what they're doing, and everyone just assumes that, and the police aren't really investigating it. But Mako, while it happens, sees a guy running away from the scene. He drops a remote, which sort of, is clearly the device that set off the bomb, and then the guy in question, when Mako tries to catch him, firebends at Mako, implying heavily this was not, as everyone suspects, the Northern Water Tribe's doing. And that's probably coming back, right?
And that's fine. But I'm not saying it's got no merit, and it will come back, obviously. But half his story in the episode is that story. Yeah. Half his story is this Korra thing, and I would argue that him betraying Korra in order to side with a police force that isn't listening to him, right, and portraying Korra for a situation that his other plot is showing him something isn't quite right here. Right. It makes it too muddled doing half of one plot at the beginning of the episode for him and half of another plot at the end for him. Right. And not just that, but those two plots kind of contradict each other. I'm not saying that's wasted. I'm sure it will come back. But sometimes, I'm saying, I think this show is sometimes, and I think we've discussed it before, a little too serialized. Because what they've done is they've started a plot with the photo and it's not not the Northern Tribe. They've started it and it doesn't go anywhere. They just put that plot in for half of this episode, right. and like the spreading out of these plots in this show is sometimes an issue. And but going back to my original, I actually think the reasons for the breakup are interesting and interesting to explore and done well. But there's been so much back and forth bullshit with these two that the actual act of them breaking up, I'm just like, okay, it's just a bit muddled, and for a lot of reasons, including, you know, the what I've just detailed about him kind of having two plots, one of which gets forgotten about halfway through in service of in favour of another one, just makes the whole thing muddled, just really muddled and no.
That is what's tricky, isn't it? Because you've essentially got, you know, both plots are interesting, but neither are getting enough time, and then they're overlapping, which you think might cause some interesting clashes, but it just feels like nothing's really getting the opportunity to be properly explored. Like, the idea that his own girlfriend and his employer don't believe him is an interesting position to put Mako in. And then you've got the other side of it where, politically speaking, because Mako actually says near the beginning of the episode, the reason that Mako sort of turns Korra in almost to the president isn't anything to do with this plot about people believing him about who committed that bombing. It's connected to a stray line from earlier in the episode when it becomes clear that Mako believes it is potentially just an issue for the Northern and Southern Water Tribes to sort out themselves and isn't really the place of the United Forces to get involved. Mako has a position politically in that. And instead of exploring how that creates conflict between him and Korra, we're too busy doing the Mako no one believes in plot, which it would be interesting on its own to really get a chance to go into what happens to a couple when they're on two sides of a political situation. And instead, we get the plot version of it rather than the character version of it, which is, well, he literally betrays her, so she and him physically break up. Like, you know, rather than putting the characters in a more interesting sort of emotional conflict that would lead to character discussions, growth, things like that. I think it's very interesting that Mako feels differently to Korra on this, but the show doesn't have time for them to actually sit and have a conversation about it. The closest they have to a conversation is the breakup conversation, which is all fueled by physical anger over an actual direct choice that Mako made to betray her. So it's all playing out in the plot, but we're never really getting to explore how any of the characters feel about it properly. And it is the same problem we were talking about last week, where there's just too much plot and not enough time to actually explore it properly. And there's really lots of interesting ideas, and they're just all muddled in.
Because and I think the Tenzin one's a good example of that. Now, I like in principle the Tenzin stuff. I thought the thing where they were all where he went. It's not just, I can't remember what's the name of his pet.
Oh god, yeah, because it's. I can't remember. I'll find out. I'll get the name.
Yeah, but him being like, it's not just him. I've trained them all, and there's this beautiful synchronization. I love that, and I thought that whole plot and what maybe Tenzin was potentially learning about the person he'd become. I really enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. But here's my thing. And last week, the Tenzin stuff we highlighted as the best stuff of the episode. And I actually, the notion of civil war referring to the civil war between the siblings as well as the Northern and Southern tribes is really fun. But my slight issue with the Tenzin stuff is, and it's not about the content of the episodes, but it's about what they're doing with him overall, is it feels a bit like, right, Tenzin's not going to be mentoring Korra. Okay, cool. Okay, so what are we going to do with Tenzin instead? Well, we'll just have him interact with just everyone in his life. What? We'll just do different episodes where he's dealing with different children, it just doesn't feel like... And maybe it's all going to come together. And like I say, you can look at the plot this week and go, well, when he presumably ends up closer with Korra again, something like this episode will have made him realise that, you know, he's maybe treated Korra a bit too firmly because he can see his child doing that, and once he's seen it from the outside, he understands a bit more about how he's been. I'm fansplaining that, though. That's not overtly stated. That's not overtly put there. We don't have a moment of quiet reflection with Tenzin.
To be fair,
you know, we have.
To be fair, if you were executing that plot, you'd have the reveal of how it applies to his relationship with Korra once they reunite. So if later this season they come back together and he goes, you know, I've actually learned a lot while I've been away, and I'm not sure I handled you the best way. If he expresses that in a later episode, that is how you would probably handle that plot.
But for me, it comes back to being a bit too serialized for what is fundamentally, and I'm not dismissing it at all, or dismissing the genre. But what is fundamentally a children's TV show, I think you have to have a moment of Tenzin going in this episode, even if someone mentions Korra's name and he looks quietly to the something. And I know there's the moment where he goes, "Trust me, son, I understand," when his son says how lonely it is. And I thought that, you know, but a moment like that, more overtly linked to Korra, I think would do that. But because I don't believe, you know, there's going to be dialogue in 6 episodes' time where Tenzin goes, "Yeah, actually, I learned something when I was mentoring my son and teaching him to be a mentor." Like, I just think it's a little too serialized for me personally, I think, at this point. But again, I can't stress enough, there's so much to enjoy about the episode as well. I just left it a bit frustrated because I was like, it's really trying to do a lot here, and I also get when they were protesting and then there was the bomb and stuff, I was like, I'm really enjoying this, and I still, you know, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but everything we've said in the past about how Korra feels like a completely different show and maybe a show in a more modern world and all of that sort of stuff, and we're in for that. We like that. Cool. Repeat, insert that speech here. I'm watching this going, I really like this, but I do also understand that if you loved Avatar for Aang and his gang going round marketplaces that turn in postal services that turn into roller coasters, I can understand why this political espionage thriller is potentially, you know, I understand.
Particularly because I do feel like the execution of the idea is weaker here than I think that's the big problem. I think that, like, it's one thing to do something different, and that's a tick. And that will always alienate some fans. But I think what happens is the fans who feel that way get extra ammunition because the execution is less than perfect. So they don't just have to go, I don't like it because it's different. They can also go, I don't like it because it's different, and here's all these flaws. Because it hasn't been executed brilliantly either. It's been executed mostly fine. Like, the first season, I think, had a better balance so far than the second season of that stuff. I think the second season started with such hope and all these really interesting ideas, but the execution has just been so muddled because it's just... They've packed in too much. I think it's like they've written 20 episodes worth of plot and, you know, crammed that into 14. That's what it feels like. It feels like with a bit of slower pace and a bit more time to explore all these admittedly very interesting ideas, we'd have a really good show. Like an incredible show. But instead, it just ends up being mildly frustrating because there's tons of potential splattered all over the place that doesn't get explored. That idea of a couple being split by political ideology is fascinating. Korra letting her heart dictate, no, I'm with the Southern Water Tribe, they've been wronged in this situation. And Mako with a more, like, sort of pragmatic approach of, I'm not sure the army should be, you know, getting involved in every little internal squabble. That's those two people on very different political sides of the debate. Having that happen within a couple is fascinating and could be a really good story for an episode of this show. But instead, it was a fucking a sort of C or D plot. It was a one element of an episode that feels like it had like 10 different things going on, and it got like 3 minutes, 4 minutes of screen time at that, if that. And that's really what will come. That's really what this is coming down to. Is just nothing is getting properly explored. There are loads of interesting ideas, and if you dig, you can find interesting character arcs and moments like that. Even coming down to the Tenzin stuff you just talked about, you're not convinced. The show hasn't earned your trust that that's going to come back in a way that makes sense. And I think you're right. It probably won't. It could, but it probably won't. And I think that's, again, it's the teething problems of a show figuring out its structure. And I do think they get better at it, because I do think the third and fourth seasons are certainly, at least on that front, better. I really love all the ideas in this season, though, which makes it really frustrating to watch, because I'm really interested in seeing this stuff be explored, and then I'm not getting actually to do that.
So what do you think is the difference with the pacing and the execution in this episode of and I always get confused, but the Bolin, so Bolin's the other brother, right? That's not
Bolin's the brother that's going to be Nuktuk, the Southern Water Tribe guy. Mako is the brother that's with the police. So
the Bolin Nuktuk plot is paced well, and seems to be a good example to me of embedding an idea that's clearly going to develop over the season, but it feels kind of, even though weirdly it doesn't conclude in this episode, I don't feel that same frustration of, well, you've given me the beginning of the idea, and I don't know if it's because it's the idea of it is the theme. So the difference with the Tenzin thing is they are making the themes clear. It's basically, he's just yelling the place name. The lines. I almost wanted to look up when this was airing, because the parallels there seemed pretty clear to me. But I don't know if it came before 2016. But I don't know if it's because the what it's doing thematically is a bit more on Front Street compared to, say, Tenzin maybe realizing something about his relationship with Korra. And I think it's embedded throughout the whole episode, as opposed to the Mako plots, which, half and half. It's a bit more light. It's not meant to be as heavy at this stage. So I don't know. What I'm saying is I think that the pacing of that subplot was handled well and done well.
And I think the answer is actually really annoyingly simple. Bolin has one plot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Korra is involved in 3. Mako is involved in 2.
Yeah.
Bolin has a plot. So it's not feeling as muddled or as undercooked, because every time we see him, we're focusing on that one thing that's happening to him. When we see Korra, she's fighting on 3-4 fronts, and in different ways. And it's really muddling things up. And again, Marco's the best example of that this week, because as you said, not only has he got 2 plots, but his 2 plots kind of don't go well together. Because one is him. No, and I agree with you. One is him choosing, state and his job over his girlfriend. One of them is, him breaking up. Well, it's actually, one of them is, the other one, sorry, is him being mistreated by that very institution.
Yeah.
And that's, those 2 plots don't gel very smoothly for that reason.
But again, it's what's frustrating is it's a really good idea. They could. The notion of, her having that weight of, or the notion of, he's so into the state mindset that he's ignoring that fact. And, even though it's mistreating him, he's still running to them to give them information. Like that again, it's an interesting idea that's just not executed well. I do want to go back to Bolin, but before, just because, it was really fun. Like, it's really well done, and maybe we don't need to go back because that's all there is to say. But another example, Asami. Like, is this actress getting paid by the episode? Because you don't need Asami, you don't need a scene. It's not like they're arriving home. Just when we next see Asami, that's what she's been doing. You don't need a scene setting up what she's about to. It's too serialized. It's like, well, we need to explain where Asami's gone. Well, explain that when we see Asami again, and you're actually doing a plot with it. Don't just have a scene
at the beginning of this episode. They get off the boat and they all out loud describe what they're off to do. So literally, like, Asami's like, I'm gonna go check on my factory.
But we don't need that. It's not needed. Do you know what I mean? It's like they've. It's in some respects. It's like they broke the story as a movie and then chopped it up in some respects. Like, you know what that scene really reminded me of? You know that bit at the beginning of Endgame where Captain Marvel's like, yeah, you probably won't see me for a while. And it's like, well, she's not coming back until a pivotal point in the battle. Like, and then the character just fucks off. It was like that, except this is an episode of a TV show.
I'm going to be, and then she looks straight at the camera, busy.
But it's like, but that's fine in a movie. Well, it's not brilliantly done in Endgame, but it's, you know, that is a movie. At least she is coming back. Essentially, that episode of MCU.
I just can't get my head around like how we got here. Like, because I just think so much of this is like they just. It's like they had too many good ideas and weren't willing to let some of them fall to the wayside. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
So they stuffed them all in. And I get that. Sometimes you have so many... I mean, there's a lot going on in this season. And I could also think as well, see a world where they go, well, we've got a lot of ideas here. Is this too complex? Or is this, like, going to be complex to the point... Because there's a very fine line, right? You make something complicated without crossing that line, then you get something with a lot of depth and a lot of like layers. You know, you could if you balance it right, having almost too many ideas can actually lead to a show feeling really interesting and complex and like deep in a way that, like, you know, because there's a lot going on, right? But if you do, the difference between getting that right and getting that wrong is so fine, that margin, you know, and if you're just on the wrong side of it, you end up with frustration, which is where we are. Like, it's just frustrating to watch. But it's like, I feel for them because they've clearly tried to make this show a bit more adult, a bit more complicated, a bit more, you know, sort of complex to Avatar, which is like, what's the plot this week? Oh, this town have run out of water and Aang's going to help them, you know, figure out where the water's gone. And it's like, oh, the Fire Nation have built a dam. Well, Aang's going to, you know, bring water back to the town. Like, a really simplistic plot. Whereas here, like, it's like there's like 10 things happening and they're all really complicated and like, well, not complicated, but like they're all intertwining and stuff. And again, I think there's a way to do this where it feels satisfyingly complex without being too far, but this is too far. and I do think they get the balance better in subsequent seasons. But I want to make it very clear, if you listen back through these episodes, at no point of any of these ideas being bad ideas. So that's why I feel bad for these writers.
If they were bad ideas, it wouldn't be so frustrating.
Right, exactly. That is what it is, isn't it? It's literally like we're on the cusp of there's something really great inside of this, but it's currently being hampered by the overcomplications. It does feel like they almost needed more time to get these scripts sort of cleaned up and tightened, and maybe like just trim a little bit of that stuff. But hey, much like last week when you did it at some point, I skipped through like 3 different rants there without giving you a moment to talk about Bolin. So how are you feeling about the Bolin storyline? You enjoying that? You're
enjoying it.
I'm Chris. I always talk too much of these podcasts. No, you don't need to worry about it if you ever go too far, because if anything, it won't even do the tip of the iceberg in terms of rebalancing things. So don't worry.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's just nice to prove I'm actually watching the episodes. You know.
Yes, yeah. Vacation Chris is very much not here this week.
Yeah, I forgot about Vacation Chris.
How do you feel about the episode, Chris? Yeah, I liked it. No, I think I jokes aside, because I'm obviously joking about that. But no, you know, I think I think the bowling plot's really good. I think you're exactly right. I think it's a simple plot that is like executed well. It's an interesting idea, and it makes a lot of sense that Bolin, who has some popularity from his time as a fire ferret, and just being an all-round lovable guy, right? You know, I like the idea that Varric clocks that and goes, there's my star, right? And I also really like the very smart choice. Film has basically just been invented, and they're already thinking about making a propaganda movie. I really like the idea that one of the first things that happens now Varric has invented film is how can we turn public perception to the cause. And he's doing it for money, but he doesn't care. That's fine. He'll earn money. So he shot footage of the Northern Water Tribe sort of going in and taking over in the Southern Water Tribe, and he's now going to mix that in with footage of, you know, Bolin being an action hero, and then he's going to release it as a movie, but actually it's propaganda. That's genius on so many levels. It's fun for Bolin because it's a really good play on, like, you know, you've got these really nice lovable people and they just sort of get like, you know, they're very likable, so you can just put them as the face of a thing, and Bolin's being sort of pulled into that system now. It makes a lot of sense as a place to take that character, but it also again shows Varric being very smart and calculating with everything he does, but also always like looking after his profit line. You know, it makes sense on purpose. It fits in with the existing plot neatly. It says a lot about Varric, and it's putting Bolin in an interesting place because he's been at a bit of a loose end this season, especially now his marriage is broken up. So yeah, I'm really enjoying that whole plot. Nuktuk is one of my favorite parts of this entire season, and there's more of that to come. So I'm looking forward to seeing that play out more so over the next few episodes, and I really like where we're at with that. And again, because it's one very simple plot that fits in neatly to what's going on around it and doesn't feel muddled in any way.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
I really loved it. What do we think then about Korra v. But as far as I'm concerned, Audrey Plaza. I don't know the character's name. I'm really sorry.
Esker. Esker and Desna. Who there's a weird. This is another weird thing of just like if we're actually listing the plots of this episode, is this the E plot? So there's a scene early in the episode where Unalaq, and this scene fucking pissed me off. Some lazy bullshit writing. Because last week, Unalaq says to Korra, I don't need you anymore. And she's like, oh, fuck. So I can't even leverage that. And then she leaves because of that. Now he's like, well, I still need the Avatar, so go get the Avatar. And even Esker's like, and this is like is this lamp shading? It might not be. It's leaning towards lamp shading, where they have in the script, Esker go, well, didn't you tell Korra last week you didn't need her anymore? And he's like, I told her what she needed to hear. And I'm like, you know that meme of the lady with all the, she's like scrunched up her face and there's all the calculations floating around her? That's me when he said I told her what she needed to hear. I'm like, in what way did it benefit you to tell her that last week? Okay, it got her to stop threatening to leave, but then she left. Like, if anything, you gave her carte blanche to fuck off. I don't understand. It's so weird. It's such an unnecessary back and forth. I was literally scared. That line, like, really pissed me off because it just makes no sense. It's just like the writers going, right now we need Korra to not be able to have that leverage because we need her to be able to just fight back and stuff, and we can't have him just give in because he needs the Avatar. So we'll have him say he doesn't need her anymore, but then next week he'll need her again.
Yeah,
but she's not there anymore. Doubt. So what will we do? Well, he'll send his daughter and son after her. Okay, why do they want to do that? Because they blame Korra for the marriage dissolving?
Even though Korra was nowhere near connected to any of those scenes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, look, you could, again, fansplaining, because I don't think the show lays this out.
Fansplaining, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess if you do some fansplaining, you can, because Korra's choice to free her father and the southern rebels sort of kicked off essentially a war that broke up that marriage because Bolin went with Korra. So I guess you could kind of reverse engineer that logic, but it's not very direct and it's not very clean. So yeah, so there's like two scenes. It's one where Unalaq says that, and that pissed me off. And then it's Eska and Desna going after Korra while she's off to somewhere. I can't even remember where she said she was going. Just anywhere, I guess. And as they're attacking her, that fizzles out anyway and is a pointless plot because then Korra is attacked by a spirit. Wouldn't this have all just been cleaner if you take out the Unalaq scene, take out Desna and Eska going after Korra, and just have her be attacked by the spirit?
Yeah, absolutely it would.
And then you gain minutes back that you can apply to any of the other plots that feel undercooked. Because I don't know what the purpose of that plot is. I don't know what do we gain, either narratively or from a character perspective, with Esna and Deska going after Eska and Desna, going after Korra. I don't understand the purpose of that.
We get some. We like those characters, and we get some funny moments, with them. But yeah, probably potentially. But most of the funny moments with them, when they're connected to Bolin, and there's that great moment where they appear on the film, and he screams. Yes. But the end moment isn't that. And look, also I have to say, to be fair, also what we got to acknowledge here is that we were sat here, especially me, I was quite vocal about it, sat here moaning last week about the lack of action and the fact that the rescue sequence in particular felt really flat. Visually, them attacking Korra and then the resulting battle with the spirit as well. Visually, it's fantastic. I was like, "Oh, sweet! We got ourselves an action sequence, baby!" Like, I'm here for it.
And to be fair, quite a good one.
Yeah, it just kind of comes a bit out of nowhere. I'm like, "Oh, she's on the water and they're attacking her now." Okay, fine, I guess. Cool, all right. Where was she? Did we establish where she was traveling to?
I'm sure we did, but it was lost in the shuffle of like this episode. Like I think after the Mako thing, she does say where it is she's off to. But then it all just gets sort of lost in the shuffle. I'll try and find out. She's heading to the Fire Nation. She says it right after she breaks up with Mako. She says she's going to go to the Fire Nation and get help from them if the United Forces won't help. Right, cool. So that's where she was heading.
So, fucking again, Zape Jed's in this episode. Jay's in this episode, isn't it? We got Zukipoos Jr. in this episode. We'll come back to that. But nothing really to say other than, again, perhaps the episode's doing a bit much. The fact that Zukipoos Jr. is in this episode and we haven't talked about it yet and forgotten it.
To clarify, Zukipoos Jr.
Okay, sorry. Zukipoos
It's General Iroh, and he is the grandson of Zuko.
Right. Fair enough. And
we got that a bit muddled last year. I think we kept saying he was his son, and then we got a few comments that said he was grandson. And I think at one point I did say grandson, like I questioned it in a podcast, but I never clarified. I never Googled it, which I could have done. It would not have been hard, or even just done the mental math of this is 70 years later.
Good old ZPJJ. But that sequence visually when they attack her on the water and then the resulting battle with the spirit is great. There's some great stuff in that for sure.
Yeah, and so let's do some positives, like stuff I like. I do like a lot of these storylines. I think the Korra. I think the political intrigue of who is this third party that's stoking this war. That's an interesting idea. Someone has a vested interest in these two sides going to war with each other because they blew up the southern sort of embassy and it didn't appear to be the Northern War Tribe. I believe Mako's, actual police work over fucking those two guys sat behind their desks like, might as well eat a donut while I'm here. These kind of like caricatures of bad cops. and then Mako sort of like trying to do the right thing and being like, guys, I'm investigating this, and looking at us like, what are you doing? Getting evidence? What are you, an idiot? Like, those guys. I think that's a really interesting idea. I like where that's going. I'm intrigued by that. And I was intrigued by that on initial viewing also. I'm not going to spoil where that goes, but yeah, it's a good idea for a plot. I like the idea that Korra is frustrated that she can't get what she wants from the United Forces. Like, she can't just, as the Avatar, get this arm, because it's a whole political situation. They're like, whoa, I know you're the Avatar, but we ain't stepping inside of that at all. Also, the idea, this perception that because it's an internal fight between the Southern and Northern Water Tribes, everyone's kind of perceiving it as, this is very much, we have to let your country or nation figure out who's leading it. Like, that's between you guys. We can't step in. If the Water Tribe in general were invading, the Earth Kingdom, we'd have a different conversation, because that's them sort of warmongering. But this is like a political scenario inside of your country. Like that, it makes sense to me, and I think it's a really good way to push this story forward of Korra being frustrated with her station. In a modern world, do you even have a place for an Avatar? Because it's all politics and stuff. That's a really interesting idea. Not getting explored, but it's an interesting idea. I loved all of the stuff with Tenzin and Milo in terms of what it says about like Tenzin's own approach to training, and that it works and it gets results, but it is lonely. That's a really sweet idea. Even if it doesn't ever directly tie back to Korra, I think that's a really nice plot. There's so much to love about this episode. I guess the real plot that like never really like works on any version. Oh no, because I even said it earlier. Like the idea of Mako and Korra being on separate sides of a political debate is interesting, but just none of it gets to be what it could be, and it's all just So that's kind of like it's so frustrating, because I just think in terms of the number of ideas in this episode, I like them all. I also really like Varric very smartly, being like, well, Asami needs to sell shit. You now have a southern rebels that need weaponry and tanks and boats or whatever. Let's hook that up. Like, that's a very smart idea. Again, for profit, but smart. There's just, I don't know, there's so much stuff going on that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it just ends up being this really muddled mess of an episode. And also, it doesn't really feel like, and this is just a serialization part, it doesn't have a flow where it goes A to B to C as an episode. It's just all happening at once. It's this big swirl of chaos. And you can break it down and separate it into its parts afterwards, but in viewing it does feel very muddled. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to like in the episode, but I think the execution right now is leaving something to be desired. That's for sure. Yeah, no,
I completely agree with all of that, and it's and again these, and I know I in particular have ranted this week, but again there is to some degree that caveat of, this wouldn't have wound me up as much just watching this show normally.
Right, but we're watching it with an eye to, like, we've got to talk about this. So let's think about what's working and what's not working. And these episodes, there are more things that are not working. I also did enjoy that. I did enjoy Lin Beifong's "You should have seen Air Temple Island after Tenzin broke up with me." That was funny.
Yes. Yeah, I thought that was very funny as well. Yeah, I did enjoy that.
So are we calling that the summary of our thoughts?
I think that's a fair summary. I think, Dan, it's time to triv it up.
I'm gonna give you some trivia. So there's a fair few bits of trivia this week. I took a couple out because they didn't make sense or I didn't care. But there was more than usual this week. But I think I've condensed it. So during the Peace March, the signs held by the Southern Water Tribe residents are written in Chinese. I couldn't figure out which dialect, and Google Translate would not help me. Even though I had the exact symbols like written out thanks to the wiki, I copied and pasted it thinking it would determine it, but it was like Chinese unspecific or something like that in brackets. I was like, cool, thanks. But the signs read freedom, peace, and autonomy for the South. Or Google Translate gave me Southern autonomy as an alternate reading of that, but it's the same meaning. So yeah, there's a. For anyone wondering what those signs are read. Michael Dante DiMartino voiced the pro-bending spectator who calls out Bolin. DiMartino's voice was originally intended just to be a placeholder for the early animatic, but it was kept in due to the crew members really enjoying the performance. It's fun. It is good. So a little voice cameo from one of Mikey and Bri Bri. Korra and Asami meeting with Varric originally had the Tycoon continuing to dangerously fire his bow and arrow as the scene played out. I actually think that's better, and I'm sad that didn't stay.
Yeah, that's enjoyable.
Yeah, I love Varric so much. Based on the information in this episode, it seems Varric is the person or the inventor that created hair dye in the Avatar world, Ginger being its first user. So there you go. This episode was watched by just 1.1 million viewers in the US, making it the lowest rated episode across books, both books 1 and 2, which is unfortunate. But understandable. The term Flameo revealed in The Headband.
Wait, so hold on. Rated is in, just to go back on that, rated is in, like,
TV.
Viewer rating as in everyone that, IMDb rating, or are we talking number of
No,
viewers?
no numbers. He'd had 1.1 million viewers in the US, making it the lowest rated episode in terms of butts in seats. So I think, considering that last week's episode was a bit muddled and overly complex, I feel like you may have turned off viewers then, leading to this having a low rating. It wouldn't surprise me again to find. Well, actually, this is the lowest of book 1 and 2. So actually, the ratings clearly improved after this episode. Weird. But there you go. The term Flameo was revealed in the Avatar Last Airbender episode, The Headband, to have sort of fallen out of everyday use, but Aang was still using it because he's obviously over 100 years old. But it appears to have resurfaced. It's used in this episode by Lin Beifong, though its meaning appears to have changed to be that of a mild swear word used to convey surprise and shock, because Lin's sort of like, Flameo, she reacts like that. In the episode's commentary, DiMartino mentioned that the writers had intended for Flameo to be more well used post 100-Year War, because obviously the Fire Nation are sort of, rejoined with the rest of the world in being, peaceful part of the existing sort of, the all the coexisting societies. So that makes sense. And I like the idea that its meaning or usage might have changed slightly, because that's what happens with words, isn't it? I'll never forget being on a bus and hearing a guy, slightly sort of chavvy guy in the UK, trying to explain to his friends that he wasn't feeling well, so he wasn't coming out. And he's like, nah, mate, nah, I'm not coming out tonight. Nah, I'm ill. Nah, not ill. Not ill, I'm ill. Nah, I'm sick. Nah, not sick. I'm poorly. Took him 3 attempts.
I was a bit confused there though. I didn't know ill had become like sick. I didn't know.
Well, I think, you know what, Chris? That was so long ago. I think ill did that and has now gone back to being. I think that story is like 5, maybe 10 years old, and I think it's already gone back to meaning what it originally meant. That's what I think has happened. But yeah, I'll never forget that. And every time I see a TV show do that idea that a word's meaning might have changed over time, well, that comes up, I always just think of that poor guy trying to explain to his mates, and they've ruined all the negative words. So he had to call it poorly. It's very good. Anyway, the large group of lemurs huddling around Milo was an homage to Alfred Hitchcock's film The Birds. And this one, I like this one. So the dark spirit that attacks Korra at the end had to be redesigned by Brian Konietzko and Angela Muller because it looked a little too similar to a spirit that would appear in a later episode this season. I'll name this. I'll point it out when we get to it a little bit later. But there's kind of a key spirit sort of that appears in a more pivotal moment later in the season. And the designs apparently were like almost identical, and they were worried people would think they were the same. So yeah,
there you go.
That's the trivia. Is it time, Chris, for you to? And again, everyone, turn up your podcast catcher of choice right now. Your volume on your phone, your volume on your laptop, whatever you listen to this on. Whack it right up, because it's time for Chris to introduce the next segment of the show.
Boom, 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 boom. Ba 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 bum boom, ba 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 bum boom. Is it ever too late to address the things we didn't have a chance to say? Boom, ba 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 bum boom. Not when it comes to, not when it comes to, not when it comes to Chris and Dan addressing listener feedback from long ago. Boom, 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 boom.
This is so good.
I.
Hi, I'm Dan. Welcome to Listener Feedback. I just got to say, Chris, what I love about this is this feels like the true realization of Dan's quote of the week. Because for those who don't know, years ago we did a podcast called Fringe Observers, and I did a thing where every week I just picked my favorite line from the episode that we were reviewing, and it was Dan's quote of the week. And every week Chris did a little theme song, but it always ended the same. It was like you do a little weird like scat thing, like you know, then you go Dan's quote of the week. You'd always end on that.
And it did get more and more, like there were some, it was like 30, 40 seconds worth of scatting, like it did
yeah. Oh yeah, I don't want to undersell how much time you wasted for both me and the listeners. But my point was, what I liked about Quote of the Week, the song, was when you went really offbeat and did something like, really out of the realms and just did something really weird, but then it would always come back to that same Quote of the Week. And I always thought, God, what an opportunity to have forced Chris to like do a completely different song every week. And I'm really enjoying that you haven't found like a hook for this. So you are forced to just literally do a brand new thing every episode. And at some point I want to line them all up and see how different they all are.
Yes, because they won't be that different. They won't be. We recorded quite close to, well, as I think has been clear, like, because this episode, probably more than any other this season at least, we've been like, as we were saying last week, it's because for us last week was yesterday. But like, I'm sat there going, right, well, yesterday I did sort of a heavy metal guitar thing. So today I'll try and do like a piano thing. That's what that was attempting to do. Yeah. But in 3 weeks' time, I'm not going to fucking remember. And it will just say, I'm willing to bet if you line them all up, they're probably pretty similar. But anyway, what is the list of feedback, Daniel?
So, by the way, can I just make a point that my original plan for this listener feedback was just to do it sort of every couple of episodes because there were 3 or 4 things that came up last season. But I have absolutely mostly expanded this just to allow for Chris to do that every week. But also, it's actually been really fun to go back through the comments and find really specific feedback and stuff. So sometimes it's going to be a specific comment. Like last week, I brought up a very particular YouTube comment. But sometimes it's going to be something we just generally heard a lot about. Now, this one's a trickier one to talk about because I don't 100% remember exactly what we talked about. But let me tell you, Chris, we got a lot of feedback from our episode on The Voice in the Night. To the point where people saying, like, to the point where one user did say, I think COVID brain has definitely impacted Dan's comprehension of this episode. So I complained a lot.
Really, really love that.
Yeah, no, it's my favourite, absolutely. And again, I'm sorry. If anyone's been hearing my cat meowing for the last minute or two, he has been meowing to be let out. I'm actually going to have to quickly remember it because he's going to keep doing it. He's just a little whingy boy over there. So hold for 1 second, Chris. I'm gonna go over, unlock the window, let him out, and come back.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone.
It's exciting.
I'm apologising for the other side of the room, even if they can't hear me. There you go. Window open. Cat covered. There he goes. He's happy now. You can see outside. There you go. Perfect. I'm back. Sorry. So basically, when we were reviewing the Voice in the Night episode, it seems one of my concerns was that I felt like Korra flip-flopped a lot. So this is the episode where she was like, I found her behavior to be inconsistent, where 1 minute she was like doubting herself, and the next minute she was like, I'm going to fight you, Amon. Meet me at this place, and then she's back to being doubtful. It was like the episode sort of brought her to a position, then brought her backwards, then brought her back to that position. And a lot of the feedback was the Korra challenging Amon to a fight was her still feeling doubtful about her choices, but letting her bravado push her through. And that was like an intentional choice. That it kind of implied that she was not making it up as such, but that she was like deliberately masking how she really felt, making herself braver by force. Sure. Yeah, Maybe. I mean, I'll read a direct quote we had here from someone because I've got a couple here. And there were a lot of comments on this. I don't think Korra regains her confidence at all. I think she digs herself into denial of her fear, covers it up with bravado, and what changes from the beginning of the episode to the end is her realizing that that's not going to work. And that is a really good interpretation of it, and I do like that. And that's from The Ponderer. So yeah, The Ponderer is also a very good YouTuber, by the way. Go check out The Ponderer's videos. They've done some really good videos on Korra, actually, specifically as well. So yeah, I'm always going to push people in that direction. But yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And you know, maybe as was said, COVID brain has impacted my comprehension of the episode. But yeah, it's a feedback we got from a lot of different places. Like 3 or 4 4 or 5 comments here, and then like more even on the Discord. So yeah, I basically I don't have a counter because I don't 100% remember what I said, but based on the number of feedback, I'm going to basically say you guys are probably right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm just like, cool, great shout, okay, but I cannot remember enough to comment more.
Yeah, exactly. So, with that in mind, is it time we wrap this bad boy up?
I think so.
Okay, well, you can get us in all the usual places. You can go over to patreon.com/nothing-but-static if you wish to support us with money. Cold, hard cash, that's what we want. So you can go over, and help us pay the bills. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to this podcast 1 week ahead of its normal sort of public release on like Spotify or iTunes or on the RSS feed. So if you listen to us through a podcast catcher of some description, you're probably getting it a week later than the people on the Patreon are. And if you'd like to hear it sooner, go over to Patreon, little as $1 a month, you get access. Also, it gives you access to our Discord, where you can where you can interact with us generally more directly, and also bonus content. At the moment, we're doing Nothing But Lyrics, which on the first of every month, which is basically a fun podcast where we try to make sense of or make fun of the lyrics of a pop song, usually. Not always a pop song, but like a popular song. So the general term of pop song. So yeah, that's been really fun. I've been really enjoying doing that, so you can support us by doing that. Other ways you can support us, of course, are just going over to your podcast catcher of choice and reviewing it, liking it, subscribing, thumbs upping, whatever format they have that allows for that, that allows to interact with it. Do that, and it does help because it makes that algorithm more likely to suggest us to others. So it really helps. Otherwise, of course, you can tell a friend or just keep listening. We enjoy that too. And if you've got feedback for us, it's mail@nothingButStatic.co.uk, or you can head over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingButStatic UK. That one's UK too. It's youtube.com/nothingButStatic UK. That will allow you to see the video versions of these podcasts, not literally video versions, just videos with the podcast and some still images. That you can comment on. So if you have feedback for this very episode, if you'd like to be in a year's time, in 6 months' time, mentioned in the feedback from last year segment and have Chris sing before I then read your comment, that's your best opportunity to do it. I'm liking that we're having the chance to respond to some of these comments this way now, because I don't find much time anymore to get back to the YouTube comments. I always read them, but I very rarely get back to them. So yeah, if you want to send us feedback any of those ways, or on the Discord, are the ways to do it. Of course, also find some time, if you can, to go support the brilliant Raphodraws, who supplied the artwork, the key artwork we use for this podcast, that Appa at Sunset image, and has done a bunch of other incredible images, some related to Avatar, some related to other franchises that you'd be familiar with, I'm sure. They've just done a bunch of really good art, and then they've got a bunch of it on the Redbubble account where you can get it on t-shirts and like phone cases and all sorts of stuff like that. So so it's Raphodraws, RAPHO Draws, DRAWS. You can get them on Instagram.com/Raphodraws or at launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws, which will give you access to like their Tumblr and Twitter and Redbubble and YouTube accounts, and you can get access to all the stuff there. Do it. Right, so that's everything. I think that was surprisingly concise for me, I feel.
Yeah, in general, as we said yesterday, you can really tell when we've got a time constraint and when we don't. And this has been a nice, concise hour because we have a slight time constraint.
What's really frustrating about that is it shows we can do it.
That's worse.
That's much worse.
as I said off mic yesterday, I do genuinely think the podcast is better when it's this as well. Not nothing but static. I think nothing but static. Benefits from a fluid. From a bit more of a fluid, loosey goosey type of feel. But if I'm a big Korra fan, I don't need to hear us dissecting breakfast meats for 15 minutes. Yeah,
I think breakfast meats are a really important discussion. But anyway, that's everything for this week.
Well, but is there any? But surely, I mean, bacon and sausages. There's no other contender for best breakfast meat, is there?
So, well, they don't really have it in this country because we would call it like a gammon steak. But in America, they have breakfast ham, and that is pretty good. We don't really have a direct equivalent. They're like rounds of ham that you fry. I think Dexter is seen eating one in the opening of Dexter. That's what he's eating with his eggs in that, I think.
It's a good breakfast meat. I hear what you're saying.
It's a good look. Bacon and sausage are the kings, obviously, and that's always going to be probably true. But there aren't no other options.
No,
and in places in Europe, you get like a breakfast platter of like salamis and stuff like that.
I do love a continental breakfast platter, or at least what to our minds would be perceived as a continental breakfast platter. Yeah.
Yes.
When I was on holiday, pre back in the day, pre lockdown, I remember a holiday where we went abroad and they did. It was like slices of bread that had egg and bacon, and peppers embedded into them, and oh man, what a breakfast treat that was.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And when we come back in 1 week's time when we sit down to review The Sting.